I'm here with international law expert and constitutional expert Bruce Fein, who regularly testifies before Congress, renowned attorney, the founder and president of the American Freedom Agenda, who has participated in writing constitutions for other countries, including the interim constitution for Iraq, and is presently consulting with the country of Nigeria on their new constitution. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Bruce. Let me start with a few of my observations, and then maybe you correct me or tell me what you think. But it seems like we do have a war on the Bill of Rights. Our freedoms are in jeopardy. You have our president labeling people enemy combatants, and they're being put in jail, and they can't see lawyers. You have our president now and his administration pushing through stealth legislation right before the 2006 congressional elections so that he can declare martial law for basically any reason. You have the President of the United States bypassing the renowned FISA court and allowing the National Security Agency to spy on certain phone calls made by American citizens. Under the Patriot Act, which again was a very strongly pushed by the Bush administration, you have FBI agents showing up in people's homes because they have anti-Bush posters and intimidating them. You have the FBI going to libraries and demanding the names and records of people who and what books they read. So, and you have a total, it seems to me, shroud of secrecy around the White House and people who work for the president, such as Alberto Gonzales, who shows up in Congress and refuses to answer questions. So it seems to me that our Constitution is being undermined. Is there a war on the Bill of Rights, A? B, what would the Founding Fathers think of it? And what do you think we can do about what we see happening today?
Well, there certainly is a war on the Bill of Rights that's more intense and successful in a grim way than the war against terrorism. And it's largely there because the President and members of Congress have artificially inflated the danger of international terrorism. And it's not to suggest that it isn't a genuine danger, but it's not World War II, it's not the 3 million man Red Army, it's not 10,000 nuclear warheads that could destroy millions overnight. And by this artificial inflation, he has then sought to justify these extraordinary measures that depart from our most fundamental checks and balances and protections against government abuses that have been the hallmark from the United States since its inception. Indeed, some of these rights, like the privilege of habeas corpus, the simple right to ask a court to decide whether a detainee is being held lawfully, goes back to Magna Carta of 1215. That's 8 centuries old. That we are abandoning these fundamental principles in order to create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation and aggrandized government power, largely to aid, I think, the incumbents who thrive off fear, which naturally creates a unity and rallying around.
So are you saying we're facing a propaganda war? Is that?
I don't know whether propaganda isn't a little bit too derogatory, but by and large, that's the core of the issue. There has not been by the administration, I say, or Congress in the oversight, a fair calculation of what is the level of the Al-Qaeda danger. Why is it said to be the equivalent of the Bolsheviks or Hitler or Hirohito that had million-man armies and the most sophisticated scientists building the most advanced chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons? How can that be? And we have had, fortunately, not any reprise of 9/11, using our customary prosecutions in civilian courts for 5-6 years.
Well, you know, intelligence experts you've talked to say that probably the true Al-Qaeda types in this country...
There are a handful. You can count on your hands. And that's because this country simply doesn't create the kind of hatred and extremism that would result in this kind of demented behavior. That doesn't mean, of course, that there aren't evil people out there. Timothy McVeigh was evil. He killed hundreds with a bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. It didn't mean we were at war. We had snipers in Washington, D.C. a few years ago that created a great danger for millions. It didn't mean we were at war.
No, you're dealing with criminals.
Yeah, you're dealing with criminals, and the criminal process is adequate. And I think it's wrong for the administration to suggest that the criminal always backward-looking is only trying to punish people after a dastardly deed has been accomplished. The vast majority of our successful anti-terrorism prosecutions have been conspiracies that have been stopped at the early stages, the very earliest stages.
Through civilian courts.
Through civilian courts, not any military commissions or enemy combatant tribunals or otherwise. And it's not to say that it's conceivable down the road that the terrorism threat could rise to a higher level, but we have to keep our due process and constitutional protections intact, commensurate with the level of the danger. And the fact is that we've learned a lot since 9/11, and what might have been feared in a fog of uncertainty a few hours after 9/11 shouldn't be what we fear 6 years later, when we know that that imaginary fear has not been proven, and that we can rely upon our customary due process and criminal law procedures to ensure that we punish the guilty, but we don't punish the innocent, and that we take measures in our investigative tactics that secure the spontaneity and freedom to criticize government without fear that's so essential to keeping our democratic discourse open and vibrant. And the fact is, when the society, when Congress becomes timid, we end up with very, very unwise and oftentimes great folly abroad. In my judgment, a large reason why the Iraq War has degenerated into the situation as it has is because there weren't checks. People feared that if they criticized the president, they criticized even marginal efforts to go after al-Qaeda in Iraq, they would be accused of being traitors.
This includes Congress. You call Congress timid.
Congress is timid.
Isn't it Congress's job to hold the president responsible?
Of course. They take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, which includes oversight. And it's important, since Congress appropriates every dollar the president expends in foreign policy or otherwise, they need to know why that dollar is being spent, and that it be spent in a way that's consistent with our international stature and with our own values. And that's where Congress has totally fallen down. But to go back to your initial question, yes, there's a systematic assault on the Constitution, on the Bill of Rights, without any justification other than political expediency and thinking you can profit off of frightening the people.
What were the founders? People who wrote the
They would
Constitution
be horrified by what they see now, because the fundamental idea of the founding generation was, first, the chief mission of the state is to make men and women free to pursue their ambitions and to develop their faculties, not creating government and empires. And the second thing they understood was that human nature is inclined to abuse power when it's unchecked. Trust me should not be the measure of our civil liberties. Checks and balances, vetting of one branch by another being essential to ensuring that we live in a free society and that we do not go on adventurism abroad to serve a political purpose at home.
Jefferson said, mistrust all those in power.
Absolutely. And he said that those who hope to be free and ignorant hope what never can be. And the fact is that Congress is thinking, by keeping us in ignorance, by not exposing the nature of the spying programs and the various and sundry elements that went in to the decision-making process in Iraq or otherwise, we'll be free. We won't be. We will be weaker because we won't know how to cure the problems that have led to our current calamitous situation in the Middle East.
Over the past several years, there's been a number of surveys that indicate that the American people have little, if no, knowledge of what's in the Bill of Rights. You know, like I said, it's 462 words, and American people don't even know what's in those 462 words in those first 10 amendments. If that's true, we need some hope here. What's the hope? If our freedoms are diminishing, we may wake up one morning and the President of the United States has the power to declare martial law. We may be living in a dictatorship. How do we stop that? What's the hope?
John, history is biography. It's you and me and all the listeners. We have the capacity to change the situation through insisting on upgraded education, civic responsibility, taught both in the school and in the home, in our own private lives. And that's all we can do as individual citizens. We have the right to petition Congress and government for redress of our grievances and to create an educational system and a civic culture that encourages knowledge and mastery of our democratic dispensation, so those 462 words will be mastered and fully appreciated in their philosophical sense. And that's what we can do as individuals. Is it a guaranteed success? No. But no enterprise ever begins that's worth undertaking with a guaranteed success. If that were true, you wouldn't need to undertake the enterprise. And so each individual needs to hold themselves responsible for the education and the involvement in public affairs that is required for a government to persist that's by the consent of the governed.
Like I always say, the Constitution starts with those three beautiful words in the preamble, we the people. So you're saying it's the people's job to keep themselves free, and if they don't, then it's the people that's the enemy of freedom.
That is correct. And it's one thing that our President Grover Cleveland once mentioned in his second inaugural address. He said, yes, he took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. But he said, it's just not my obligation. It's yours as people to hold me accountable and to be ever vigilant and to ensure that every other office holder enforces and defends the Constitution as you see it. So that idea of the oath belonging only to officials in government is wrong-headed. We all have an oath, written or unwritten, as Americans, to ensure that our Constitution thrives and flourishes every day of the week.